Yeah, hi. So this is actually a very interesting paper for if you really want to build theories, if you want to construct theory. So the normal way, the normal approach of building theory that we all know is through qualitative analysis, and that is one of it. And we use the grounded theory. But what this paper is trying to say is that the grounded theory is not the right way, but we use abduction. And when I saw it, I'm like, wow, I need to understand this. And it took a while for me to read through and understand what the researcher is trying to communicate. And I want to break this down in a way that you also understand it. So even when you're reading the paper, you'll be like, oh, I understand what the paper is saying because you've already had it here. So the theory construction in qualitative research from grounded theory to abductive analysis. So without further ado, let's just go ahead. So I prepared this slide, but before I go through the slide, that's if I will go through the slide, I want us to talk about what the paper is all about, so you can understand it. And the whole idea is not to recount, but to make sure that I break it down in a way you understand, and also that this is the way that I learn. Now, for a very long time, the old way of we know that researchers build theory is through grounded theory, right? That if the case is qualitative analysis. Now, this way told researchers to enter a project with a totally empty mind. So they're saying, oh, you know what? When you have data, when you want to get into a project, go into this project with an empty mind. You know, you don't need to have strong knowledge of the literature or the theory because they believe that data will emerge from your the theory will emerge from your data. So they don't want you to get biased with what is available, and they want the theory to emerge from the data. So, but what the author said, obviously they are more experienced. They're saying uh, you can't see what you don't know. You can't just see what you don't know. And I will explain. If you don't know, for instance, if you don't know the rule of gravity, and if you see an apple falling from the tree, you wouldn't understand. And that is almost like what you see apple falling from the tree, but you don't know the principles of gravity and you don't know the, the rules of gravity. Now the next is a contradiction. Now in grounded theory, you are told to ignore theories, and you also been expected to have theoretical sensitivity. How can you ignore theory and have theoretical sensitivity? It doesn't. It's contradictory, right? To have theoretical sensitivity, you need to know what the theory says, and you're told to ignore theory. So now, the author is saying the result of this now because researchers aren't reading enough, and what they do, they often end up describing the obvious as opposed to coming up with something new. You know, they keep on describing what is already there because they're not reading enough. They don't know that whatever they are coming up with is already there. So you need to know you need to know what is already there for you to describe something. So which means that you need to read enough. You need to arm yourself with enough theory. Now, so the author said the solution to this is abduction, the logic of surprise. And the author introduced the idea of abduction, and it is the only type of thinking that actually creates new idea. So abduction is the only type of thinking that creates new idea. I want you to get into your mind. Abduction is the only type of thinking that creates new idea. So let me even go through the slide and see. Like, okay, now let's talk about the inductive dilemma. Now this is more like a pattern finder. Now you see, for instance, you see 100 white swans, and you say, okay, I guess all swans are white because you see 100 white swans. You come to the conclusion that all swans are white. So you are literally inducing from what you see. And this is safe because it doesn't give you any new categories of thoughts. It is safe. And and in this slide you can see the like what I've said is already in this slide. You know, induction, the theoretical sensitivity. How can a researcher possess the armamentarium of categories and hypotheses needed for theoretical sensitivity while simultaneously ignoring the very literature that provides it? So now let's talk about deduction. I don't have it here. Now, deduction is the rule follower. More so I want you to see, also have the idea of imagine a black swan. Now, deduction, you start with a rule. So let's say the rule is all swans are white. And you look at a new swan to see if it fits. And if it fits, it confirms your rule that all swarms are white. So you are just simply deducing. You're confirming what you already know, and you're not coming up with any new thing. You're not reinventing any new thing. You're only deducing, right? So the problem is now the next one that the researcher proposed is abduction. Abduction, the creative solver. What happens here? You suddenly see a black swarm because with induction you see 100 swarm, 100 white swarm, and you propose that all swarms are white. Then with deduction you start with a rule all swarms are white, and you see a new swarm. You said okay, it fits the category, right? Then with the abduction you see a black swarm, and in your brain stops to work, and you're like, this shouldn't be here. This is a surprise. You then form a new best guess. That is abduction. And you say, you might this best guess might be maybe swarm color depends on the specific gene that only appear in this region. So this slide, I said it is epistemologically fairy tale. Despite its popularity, even devoted practitioners have questioned whether grounded theory is fulfilling its promise. The lack of theoretical breakthrough from studies claiming to use GT is notable. See, the lack of, like I said, breakthrough, finding something new. Decades of application have produced solid normal science, but few genuinely new empirical based theories. Critics argue that grounded theory focuses on induction, which is simply you see hundreds white swarm and you say, I guess all swarms are white. You find a pattern and you make an inductive decision about it. So you said critics argue. So if you go to the next slide, a more radical privilege is abduction, like we just said. So you're saying they said I'm saying recent scholars argued that grounded theory is closer to what philosopher Charles Peirce called abduction. However, many still position abduction as secondary, a moment of imaginative thinking with a larger inductive process. So, so you get the idea what abduction is more like a surprise, something that you don't intend to find. Then you make an educated guess. So let me talk about something I call the theoretical backpack. Maybe this will help you understand this. Now the author wants you to be an informed theoretical agnostic. So by informed, what do I mean? You should read deeply and fill your backpack with many theories from sociology, psychology, and history. By agnostic means that he doesn't want you to fall in love with just one theory. He wants you to have a bucket of theories and understand them, and not just say, okay, this is the way. And why having this backpack full of theory allows you to recognize surprise, because you have a lot of backpack full of theory, it allows you to recognize a surprise when you see it. So if you don't know what is normal, if you don't know what normal looks like, you will never know what is weird. So you need to know all these theories, and you need to understand what these theories say. So when you see what is weird, you can be able to recognize it. So another point here I'm trying to say is a detective too. How do you actually find these surprises? Now, the way is to use the tedious step of research as a flashlight to find weird stuff. So number one is to you first of all need to revisit. You need to revisit your field notes from 6 months ago, or 7 months ago. Now, because you've read a lot of theories, you've read a lot of books. Now, what happens, because you've read a lot of theory? So when you revisit your field note, what seems boring back then might now look like a huge surprise, which is the black swan, right? So number two is defamiliarization. Now this is the act of writing what people say. This is the act of writing down what people say makes normal things look strange. So it forces you to ask, why do do it that way? You have to ask yourself, why do it? You need to defamiliarize yourself, and you need to at, write down what people say, which makes normal thing look strange, and it actually forces you to ask, why do they do it that way? Why do these people do this thing this way? So number two is alternative casting. So what I'm trying to say in this number three is, you take a single event and you try this single event on different theories, like an outfit, right? For example, you ask yourself, how would a power theorist say this? How would a ritual theorist say this? So what happens here is that where the theory fails to fit is where you start building your own theory. So when you take this normal event, you kind of like try it on different theories. So where the theory fails to fit this event is where you start building your own theory. Now, let's go on a simple event. This simple event is a paper that was born out of the NASA mystery. I'll tell you the story. So there's a particular researcher called Diana Vaughan something. So the study was why the Challenger shuttle blew up. The Challenger shuttle is like a spacecraft. Why did it blow up? So the puzzle for her is that she thought initially she thought managers were evil and they were breaking the rules, and she was using her theory of probably rule breaking to study this. So now the surprise was the data she got actually revealed that every rule by NASA were followed. So that they didn't actually break the rule. So and since this evil rule breaker theory failed, the theory she was using to study this failed, she created a new one, which she called normalizing of deviance. So she realized that when you do something dangerous and it works once, you slowly start to think that it is safe until it's no longer safe. So, do you get the point? So, coming back to this slide, slide slide six. So, I have already said the major point in this, but let me just run through. So here, the logic of abduction, the researcher, it starts with a researcher seeing something that doesn't fit the current understanding, like we just said about the other example, a puzzle or an anomaly. And Pierre, a researcher, the philosopher who named this, called it a flash of insight. that happen when your mind is wandering. So it's the process of forming a best guess to explain why that weird, surprising thing is happening. And it is only and this is the only form of logic that actually introduces new idea into science. So abduction is the only way to introduce new idea into science. So this is the three form of inference. We've already talked about this, or deduction, induction, and abduction. So the slide 8 is the source of insight is not instinct but position. So basically, the idea here, where do these insights come from? Not from instinct, not from your position. You shouldn't be a theoretical atheist, someone that doesn't believe in theory, someone who knows no theory. No, you shouldn't be a theoretical. Instead, you should be an informed theoretical agnostic. Think of it like having, like I told you the backpack story, right? And you carry this theory so you can recognize when you find something surprising. If you don't know what the rules are, you can tell what's broken. You have to be a theoretical ag- agnostic. And case 9, I told you about the case the case study, right? From NASA. So number 10 is repurposing model. Even though the philosophy of grounded theory is flawed, is to, like coding and memoing, is fantastic. The philosophy is flawed, but the is tool is still being used. So in abductive analysis, we use these tools to create an environment of doubts, right? Tedious tasks, tedious tasks like transcribing every word helps increase the resistance of the fact against our own bias. So methods force us to keep looking at the evidence until we stop seeing what we expect to see and seeing things that are actually there. This is beautiful. And going to slide 11, the three process of generating abductive insights. I said revisiting, the familiarization. I could say uh, the familiarization, making. Oh, let me remove my hands on face from the way. Making the familiar seem strange. Writing down things creates a semantic distance, so you can see the background common sense as something that needs explaining. Then alternative casting, trying to fit your data onto five different theories at once to see which one works best. And then, like I said, the revisiting. So number 12, this is a case study of this is a case study the Stefan Timmermans saw in the ER. So the puzzle here was, why did doctors work much harder to save some patients other than others, regardless of medical science? So the abduction. While reading a book on social words, he realized that doctors were using moral calculus. So the theory, he called it the social viability. He also defamiliarized resuscitation, realizing it wasn't just about saving a life, and sometimes it was a ritual to save the family from the shock of sudden death. So number 30, slide 13, the abductive research cycle. Anomaly, you find a puzzle where your data and theory doesn't match. Abduction, you form a new guess to explain it. Deduction, you figure out what else should be true if your guess is right. Induction, you look for more data to see if the pattern holds up, and you try to prove yourself wrong. So 14, hmm, 14 is the state of preparedness for being unprepared. Script. Uh, Abductive analysis is about being professionally ready for a surprise. And by being professionally ready, it means that you have to have a strong knowledge of theory. You don't enter the field with a blank slate. Instead, you design your own research to embrace theoretical engagement from day one. As scholars, as scholars, there's a particular scholar, Geo Rechards, I don't know, 2007 said the goal is to create a state of preparedness for being taken unprepared. You train your brain to catch puzzles when it finally appears. So finally, this slide 15 is the mundanity of excellence, theory as craft. So finally, remember that being a great theorist isn't a mystery. It's not a mysterious gift. It's a craft. Just like the Olympic swimmer who gets better through mundane routine, researchers get better through daily work of coding, memoing, and reading. Memoing and reading. It requires support, it requires social support, a community of inquiry to argue with and sharpen your ideas. By treating theory construction as a practical skill, we can turn the possibility of surprise into a reliable method of discovery. And this is it. Thank you for watching, and I hope you learned something.